A private jet, a massive drug bust, and a vanished captain. But what if the true story of how he got entangled in an international drug trafficking scandal is far more complex than the headlines suggest? A private jet touched down in Paraguay. The following morning, anti-drug agents discovered 262 kilograms of cannabis hidden within. Aboard were 3 American passengers, now facing charges, and a co-pilot who, months prior, had gained internet fame by winning an aircraft in a challenge hosted by one of the internet's largest channels. While the co-pilot was detained and later cleared, the captain, the individual actually flying the jet, had already departed. He left the country hours before authorities arrived. This Estonian citizen, for whom the existence of an arrest warrant remains disputed, has largely had his perspective on these events go unheard, until now. On Friday, May 29, 2026, a Bombardier Challenger 601, a mid-size private jet registered as N116HL, was chartered. Pilots were hired to transport 3 individuals to Paraguay, ostensibly singers for a concert. The pilot in command was Keith Siilats, 47, an Estonian citizen who has spent most of his life in the United States. His co-pilot was Jabari Brown, an American who, in late 2025, achieved internet fame by winning a private jet in a MrBeast's challenge. Although Brown had flown the plane from California, the original captain was unavailable for this leg of the journey, and Siilats came highly recommended. Keith Siilats explains his connection to the co-pilot. "I signed off Jabari as a second-in-command. I conduct extensive pilot training for both pilot-in-command and second-in-command roles. I trained Jabari about a year ago on both Citation and Challenger aircraft. He actually flew David Weiss, the client, on his inaugural flight from California to Fort Pierce, Florida, alongside another captain. That captain works for a Part 135 company where I was previously employed." Siilats agreed to the Friday trip and the return flight the following Monday, but he had a prior commitment, a scheduled flight for a regular client on Sunday. To manage this, he accepted the Paraguay trip and booked a round-trip commercial ticket from Paraguay to Miami for Saturday. This arrangement allowed him to fly his client on Sunday and then return to Paraguay that night. Jabari Brown, the second-in-command, was already a minor celebrity, having appeared in a MrBeast video and won a different private jet. That Friday, their journey, which included a fuel stop in Panama, concluded with their landing at Silvio Pettirossi International Airport in Luque, Paraguay. Siilats elaborated on his professional background. "I work full-time as a contract pilot, flying approximately 6 or 7 different Challenger 601s. I am also type-rated on Citations and have experience flying G4s. The owner of this particular plane, Dennis, had posted about a year ago that he had several Challengers available for dry leasing, typically for a year at a time. I knew the owner, but I didn't know the specific individual who was leasing the aircraft from him. With my insurance as pilot in command, it seemed like a relatively safe assignment, despite the destination being Paraguay. The person who leased the plane, David Weiss, stated he was transporting a musician. I visited his website, jetweiss.com, which suggested he manages various aircraft for different clients. I was quite excited, thinking this could be a long-term opportunity, as he had leased the plane from Dennis for a year. For clarity, a dry lease involves renting the aircraft itself, without a crew. The lessee provides their own pilots. Keith mentioned knowing the aircraft's owner through a Facebook group he administers for jet pilots, which is one of the largest of its kind. He stated that the owner had advertised these jets for lease, and one was indeed leased by a passenger named David Weiss. My own research uncovered a website, gojetwise.com, which listed the owner as Dr. David Weiss, holding a doctorate in jurisprudence. However, the phone number provided on the site has since been disconnected. Keith initially described the trip as routine, but noted one early red flag: the passengers. He performed the pre-flight checks as the 3 individuals arrived at 9 a.m. There was David Weiss, a man David introduced as a singer, though Keith later suspected he wasn't, and a woman named Marisol, who appeared to be a recent acquaintance. For a supposed 4-day trip, these 3 individuals brought only one shared bag and a few small backpacks. They departed that morning, refueled in Panama, and landed in Paraguay around 9 p.m. Keith, however, did not remain. He had a pre-booked red-eye commercial flight departing in the early hours as he had another flying assignment awaiting him back in the United States. After dinner with the passengers, he returned to the airport for his flight. Upon landing in Miami, his phone immediately lit up. He recounts, "I learned about the drug discovery on Saturday, right after I landed in Miami. It was already making headlines. Jabari texted me, urging me to check the news. Before that, the fixed-base operator had called, saying, 'We have a regular scheduled drug search of the plane. Can you come to the aircraft?' I informed the FBO that I was in Miami, but Jabari was there and could assist if needed. Then, Jabari texted again, confirming, 'Check the news. They've already found it.' It wasn't a regular search. They specifically found the drugs." It's important to note that this is Keith's perspective, and as previously mentioned, my attempts to reach Jetwise for their account were unsuccessful. Here's what transpired on the ground while Keith was airborne. The morning after the jet landed, one of the passengers returned to the airport to retrieve luggage that had been left on board, presumably that single shared bag. According to official reports, he was hesitant to allow the bag to be inspected, claiming it contained musical instruments. This immediately raised suspicion. Agents were called in, and inside, they discovered 262 kilograms of cannabis. Senad, Paraguay's national anti-drug agency, characterized it as high-grade, high-THC marijuana, estimating its value on the Brazilian market at approximately $3.6 million. While some media outlets referred to the seizure as hashish, the agency itself specified it as high-THC cannabis. This raises a significant question we'll address shortly, but it's worth noting that Paraguay is one of the world's largest producers of illicit marijuana. Keith questioned the narrative. It's unclear whether the individual was loading drugs into the plane or unloading them. This forms part of my defense argument. They need to prove that any drugs were actually on the plane on Friday. Authorities claim these were high-end drugs, not typically produced in Paraguay. However, Paraguay is a major producer of cannabis, so the trade could flow in either direction. There have been reports of an arrest warrant issued for Keith by Paraguay. He clarified this. There is no warrant. Senad doesn't have the authority to issue one. That's where everyone is mistaken. I saw the reports in the news and wondered if there was a warrant for my arrest. My lawyer explained that it doesn't work that way. Senad can arrest you if they find you with drugs, but if they want to arrest you elsewhere, not in direct proximity to the drugs, a judge must issue a warrant, and no judge has issued one for my arrest. When asked why he doesn't return to Paraguay to resolve the situation, Keith responded, "Jabari was incredibly fortunate. You hear stories about others, like a pilot named Brad in Africa, who's been detained for 6 or 7 months. I know pilots in the Dominican Republic who are held for extended periods, as police have the right to detain individuals for up to 6 months. I was lucky to have another job, which means I'm not there and can continue working. I'm happy to assist them in any way possible, but I don't want to sit in jail while doing so. I'm far more effective here. For instance, I managed to gather all relevant information within 3 hours, including locations, camera recordings of the loading process, and all US-related data. If they wish to investigate any of this, I'm eager to help. I despise drug dealers. It's the worst aspect of this business. The small chance of getting caught in such a situation." He continued, "Someone provided me with the prosecutor's WhatsApp number, and I've been texting her, asking if she wants to talk, if I can use Google Translate and send screenshots. They responded by saying I should go through a lawyer, and they would send me one, but without disclosing the lawyer's name. I also encountered lawyers who proposed a $60,000 fee, $30,000 up front, and $30,000 upon the case being dropped, almost guaranteeing results. I declined that offer. Instead, I hired a reasonably priced lawyer for $1,000. My lawyer went there, and the main evidence the prosecutor is seeking concerns my flight on Sunday, as my departure that night appeared suspicious. I've provided them with cash receipts, payment records, SMS messages, and my pre-existing flight schedule, all the documentation from before the incident. I also asked my client, who I was scheduled to fly on Sunday, if he would be willing to speak with the prosecutor. This is crucial evidence, as I can manipulate anything in Photoshop, but my client is prepared to speak on record to the Paraguayan authorities, confirming that I've flown for him for 5 years and that he specifically needed me for that Sunday flight. The 3 passengers, Wise, Vasquez, and Rivas, were detained and charged with international drug trafficking. They remain in pretrial detention, charged but presumed innocent. Co-pilot Jabari Brown was arrested that night at a hotel in the capital, but days later, prosecutors released him. They concluded that as a contracted co-pilot, he had no knowledge of or involvement in the illicit cargo. He was cleared and free to go. This crucial detail was largely overlooked by initial headlines. While MrBeast pilot arrested spread globally, the news of MrBeast pilot cleared received far less attention. To entirely dispel the MrBeast confusion, which rapidly spread across the internet, the aircraft associated with the MrBeast Challenge is not the same plane involved in this incident. They are entirely different aircraft. There is no connection between MrBeast and this flight, these drugs, or Paraguay, beyond the fact that one of the pilots once appeared on his show. Any further links are merely speculation. Initial reports from Paraguay erroneously identified Siilats as the aircraft owner and claimed he had fled the country. This left Keith in the United States, observing a narrative unfold about him without his input. Upon realizing the gravity of the situation, he began making calls, including one to the mechanic at the Florida facility where the jet had been parked. Keith recounted, "I called my mechanic at the Fort Pierce departure location and asked if he knew anything about this. He replied, 'Well, actually, yes.' There were some interior specialists working on the plane late at night for the past few days. I found that odd, as typically the owner handles interior modifications, not someone leasing the aircraft. I then asked the mechanic, 'Why didn't you tell me this before I departed on Friday?' He explained, 'I used to maintain a Learjet for David Weiss previously, and there were issues with that aircraft too, involving the DEA, but that was so long ago that I assumed he had changed his ways and was no longer involved in such activities.' The mechanic then connected me with the former Learjet captain, who used to fly for David Weiss. This captain told me he quit after the DEA searched the plane once and found nothing, but he had observed bags being removed beforehand. I uncovered all this information on Sunday, which solidified my decision not to return to Paraguay. It must be emphasized that this is Keith, relaying information he states a mechanic told him. This account has not been independently confirmed and implicates individuals who, like anyone else, are entitled to a presumption of innocence. Therefore, consider this his perspective on how he began to piece together the events, rather than established fact. Nevertheless, it prompts the common question, how can you fly an airplane full of drugs and not know? The honest answer is that, depending on their concealment, a pilot might genuinely be unaware. Keith explained the possibilities. I've only seen media photos, which show these bags are specifically shaped to fit neatly into the avionics bay. If they unscrewed the floor panels, for example, and then replaced the carpet on top, it wouldn't be difficult to access these compartments without specialized tools. You simply lift the carpet and the floorboards. Beneath the floor, there's a pressurized space where the avionics are located, and there's ample room for maintenance personnel to crawl around. We don't typically pre-flight this area because the floor panels are normally screwed to the airframe and covered by carpet. The bags appear to be shaped for this space. Alternatively, if laid flat on the floor, they could resemble the insulation found within the panels. I haven't seen official pictures of the plane or the Discovery, as they haven't been released, so I don't know the exact appearance of the aircraft interior post-seizure. However, from pictures, it's usually easy to discern if the wall insulation was intact, indicating the drugs weren't in the walls but rather in the avionics bay. A common question arises. Typically, drugs flow from South and Central America to the U.S., but in this instance, it seems to be the reverse. Drugs smuggled from the U.S. into South America. Keith confirmed this unusual flow. Exactly. Jabari and I had discussed the biggest realistic risk. Someone at the airport covertly placing a kilogram of cocaine into an oxygen filling port or a wheel well, unpressurized compartments accessible from outside the plane. We even planned to tape the doors shut and inspect them carefully upon arrival. The concern was that a kilogram could be smuggled without our knowledge, then removed a couple of days later while the plane was parked, say, in Opalaka, with no one being aware. He continued, "As I investigated, it became apparent that a significant amount of cannabis is produced in California due to legalization, causing prices to crash. People calculate that if they can transport 454 kilograms of cannabis and make an additional $300 per kilogram, Even with a $100,000 cost for the jet charter, it becomes profitable. This is simply because of the large cannabis farms in California and the plummeting prices. While I don't have all the details, this explanation sounds plausible. Analysts monitoring drug trafficking trends have indeed noted this phenomenon. High-value, high-potency cannabis, cultivated in regions where it's legal and abundant, can command significantly higher prices in markets where it's not. The economic incentives shift, and with them, the smuggling routes reverse. This particular case may offer an early glimpse into a new direction for illicit trade. Keith recounted watching an AI chatbot, fed a prosecutor's press release, begin to describe him as the mastermind of the operation. He then observed this description being repeatedly amplified until it solidified into what appeared to be fact. His strategy was to disseminate his own account widely, hoping the same systems would pick it up. Regardless of one's judgment on his guilt or innocence, and it's crucial to remember he hasn't been charged, this is a tangible event affecting a real person. The damage to his reputation is already done, and we are pleased to offer a platform for his side of the story. When asked about his current employment, Keith confirmed he is still flying. I attempted to secure a position with a Part 125 operation, thinking, let me work somewhere, earn less, but avoid these Part 91 flights with random clients. With Part 135 operations, the company assumes responsibility, and there's TSA pre-vetting for all passengers, among other protocols. I then tried to enroll in CAE training to transition to Part 135, but what happened was, I was scheduled to start training today, and last night they called me, saying, "We Googled your name, and we are unwilling to train you. So now I can't even complete my recurrent training." While I am still flying a little, it's not much. It's a difficult situation where people simply Google my name, see the reports, and make judgments. I've tried to reason with them and explain my side of the story, even escalating it to the CEO of CAE, but for now, they've canceled my training. I need to find another slot so I can pursue flying for a Part 135 company. That's my plan for the next year, until these issues are resolved. Reflecting on what he might have done differently, Keith stated, "That's the core issue. It feels like death by 1,000 cuts. There were these small elements. If it had been a straightforward request like, 'Can you fly me to Paraguay?' I probably would have declined. I've turned down many flights in the past that simply felt off. But then you consider, Dennis owns the plane and leases it out. Jabari has flown this client before, and I received a reference from another pilot I trust. These three small factors, when balanced, made the job seem acceptable, good enough. Moving forward, I want to reduce my Part 91 contract flying. Pilots often discuss the inherent risk of such incidents, and that risk is very real. I believe the price of these charters has decreased. If such a trip cost, say, $500,000, people wouldn't undertake it. But the cost of this lease and associated expenses for this trip to Paraguay was under $100,000, making it financially viable for some. As a pilot, the phrase, "death by 1,000 cuts," resonates deeply with me. In aviation, and indeed in life, major incidents are rarely due to a single catastrophic cause. More often, they are the result of numerous small factors aligning. We must remain vigilant, aware, and heads up, whether in the cockpit, in business, in relationships, or in life itself. My second key takeaway from this story is how quickly a person's reputation can be shattered today. A press release, an AI summary, a headline, and suddenly, an individual is labeled the mastermind before ever stepping foot in court. On this channel, Final Descent, we strive to consistently differentiate between being charged, convicted, and cleared, because these are distinct legal statuses. Jabari Brown was cleared, the 3 passengers are charged, not convicted, and Keith Siilats has not been charged at all. These distinctions are critically important. That concludes our report. I sincerely wish Keith Siilats the very best, and hope that if his story holds true, his name and reputation will be cleared as soon as possible. This is undoubtedly a challenging period for him. Remember, superior judgment trumps superior skill. Take care.